The sky burned red when the escape pod crashed, and the forest shook like something huge had woken from a long sleep. Lyra crawled out of the wreckage with trembling hands, her silver skin scratched and glowing faintly under the strange light. She had never been alone on another world before. She had never been this far away from her people. But the strangest thing was not the crash, not the fire, not the shadows that moved behind the trees. The strangest thing was the creature she saw standing in the clearing, a human. She had heard stories of them her whole life, stories told to frighten young aliens who misbehaved. Humans do not break. Humans survive anything. Humans are dangerous even when they are dying, but she had never seen one with her own eyes until now. Commander Raiden stood with smoke curling around him, blood running down his arm, but he did not fall. He did not even sit. He only breathed hard and kept scanning the forest like he was ready for war. Lyra hid behind the broken shell of the pod, her heart pounding in her chest. She could not understand how someone injured so badly could remain standing. On her world, even a small wound could weaken someone for days. But this human looked ready to fight 10 battles. She watched as he moved toward the burning wreckage of his own crashed ship. Metal beams were twisted everywhere, heavy enough that 3 of her kind could not lift them. But Raiden grabbed one with both hands and pulled it aside to free another human soldier trapped under it. Lyra covered her mouth, shocked at the sight. No creature should be that strong. No creature should survive that much pain. The stories were true. Humans were impossible. The forest suddenly roared as something large crashed through the brush. A beast with long black limbs and glowing yellow eyes leapt from the shadows, rushing straight toward the wounded man. Lyra froze. She had seen drawings of such creatures in her academy training, but none showed how terrifying they were in real life. The beast's claws were long enough to slice through stone, and its jaws could snap metal rods in half. Raiden did not run. He grabbed a broken pipe from the ground, braced himself, and met the creature head-on. Lyra gasped as she watched the human block the first strike, roll under the second, and slam the metal pipe into the beast's jaw. It screamed, stumbled back, then lunged again with full force. Raiden took the hit on his shoulder and still did not fall. Even with blood spraying across the dirt, he kept moving, kept fighting, kept surviving. Lyra clutched her chest, unable to understand what she was seeing. No alien she knew could handle that level of impact. Bones would snap instantly. Organs would collapse. But this human's body seemed built for battle, for pressure, for danger. He was not just surviving the fight, he was controlling it. When the beast finally turned to escape into the dark forest, Raiden limped back to the clearing, breathing heavily but still conscious. Lyra stared at him with wide eyes, her fear mixing with something new, deep curiosity. Everything she had been taught said humans were unpredictable, wild, unstoppable. But she never thought they were real. She never thought she would stand this close to one. The smoke from the crash grew thicker, the forest grew darker, the silence grew heavier. Raiden examined the area again, searching for signs of danger. Then suddenly, he turned his head sharply in Lyra's direction. She ducked down, pressing her back against the broken metal, her heart racing. Had he seen her? Had he smelled her? Humans were said to have sharp instincts. Some claimed they could sense danger before it happened. She held her breath, hoping he would go away. But instead of moving closer, Raiden looked toward the sky where distant thunder echoed. He whispered something in his language and tightened the straps of his gear. Lyra slowly peeked over the metal. Raiden's face was serious, tired but calm. How could a creature so close to collapsing still look ready to protect someone? She thought about the stories again, stories about how humans formed bonds so fiercely that they would fight storms, beasts, and even death for someone they cared about. Stories that said humans did not give up, even when their bodies were failing. A cold wind swept through the forest, carrying the smell of danger. Lyra knew she should run. She knew she should hide, but her feet did not move. Instead, she kept staring at Raiden, unable to look away. The human finally sat down on a fallen log, wiping his face with the back of his wounded arm. Blood smeared across his cheek, but he did not seem bothered. Lyra whispered to herself, not believing her own words. How does he not break? She felt a shiver run down her spine, not from fear, but from the realization that everything she knew about her universe was about to change. She had met her first human, and he was even more terrifying, more impossible, and more fascinating than the stories said. And deep inside her mind, one thought kept repeating. If one human could survive all this, what were the rest of his kind capable of? This question pulled her closer to him, step by step, without her even realizing it. The hook of her fate had already caught her. Lyra stepped carefully through the soft dirt, unable to stop herself from moving closer to the strange human who should have been unconscious by now. Every step felt wrong, yet her curiosity pulled her forward like a force she could not fight. Raiden sat with his back against a broken tree stump, his shoulders rising and falling slowly as he breathed. The wound on his arm still bled, but he seemed more annoyed than afraid. Lyra kept her distance at first, watching him from behind a tall cluster of glowing plants. She tried to understand him the way she understood every living creature, by reading posture, hearing breath patterns, sensing emotional energy. But with humans, none of her usual instincts worked. His body looked exhausted, but his eyes stayed sharp. His heart sounded strained, but his muscles remained ready. He looked like a creature caught between collapse and combat, yet refusing to choose either. When a branch snapped under Lyra's foot, Raiden reacted instantly. His head turned, his hand went to his weapon, and his gaze locked onto her hiding place. Lyra froze, terrified. She was small compared to him, fragile compared to him, and untrained in close combat. If he attacked, she would stand no chance. She raised her hand slowly, showing she carried no weapons. Raiden did not aim at her. He only studied her, silent, suspicious, but not violent. After a long moment, he lowered the weapon and spoke a word she did not understand. His tone sounded more tired than dangerous. Lyra stepped out fully, trembling, knowing she had just revealed her existence to something her people feared for centuries. Raiden tried to stand when he saw her injured leg glowing with blue light. Humans healed with pain and time. Her species healed with energy and softness. Two completely opposite bodies. Two completely opposite worlds. He struggled to get up, wincing yet pushing forward. Lyra watched him limp toward him even though he was hurt. She whispered under her breath, "Why does he move when he should rest?" Raiden pointed to her leg, gesturing as if asking whether she was hurt. It confused her. Humans were supposed to be selfish, wild, focused only on mission and survival, yet this one was worried about her safety, not his own. She shook her head gently, but Raiden still looked around the forest, as if searching for more danger that might harm her. They heard something growling in the distance, a deep, heavy sound that rolled across the forest floor. Lyra's instincts told her to run, but Raiden motioned her closer to him instead. She hesitated, her body screamed in fear. Humans were dangerous, but the forest creature was more dangerous, and standing next to a human felt strangely safer than standing alone. She took a slow step toward him. Raiden did not grab her or push her. He only guided her behind him, placing himself between her and the danger. She felt her breath catch. Her people would never risk themselves for a stranger, but this human did it without thinking, like it was nature to protect someone weaker. When the growling moved farther away, Lyra finally dared to speak. Her voice trembled as she asked his name, using a universal translation sound. Raiden understood enough to answer. His voice was deep, rough, and strangely grounding as he said, "Raiden." She repeated it quietly, feeling the weight of the name. Raiden, a human name that felt heavier than the air around them. She told him her name in return. He tried to pronounce it, failing once, then trying again with a soft patience she never expected from a being known for brutality.
The forest grew colder, and the smoke from the crash started drifting toward them. Raiden motioned her to follow him away from the burning area. Lyra hesitated. Trusting someone like him felt foolish. Yet her legs moved anyway. She walked behind him, studying how he walked. Imperfect, injured, but still strong. Every step he took felt deliberate, like his body had learned to survive pain rather than avoid it. Humans were not built fragile. They were built like storms, loud, powerful, unpredictable, but able to keep moving no matter how much the world tried to break them.
As they walked deeper into the forest, Raiden slowed down to check if she could keep up. Lyra was surprised. Again. No human legend spoke of kindness, no historical record mentioned them slowing for anyone. But Raiden did. When she stumbled over a root, Raiden reached out quickly and grabbed her arm to steady her. His grip was firm, warm, and secure. Lyra gasped softly. His hand was strong enough to crush her bones if he wanted. She expected pain, but there was none. He held her gently, carefully, as if he knew her body was fragile even without being told. When he let go, her skin still tingled where his hand had touched. She stared at him differently now. Humans were known for their physical power, but she was starting to understand something else. Emotion, instinct, courage. They did not bond like her species. They did not hide feelings. They acted. They protected. They connected directly and strongly. Maybe that was why the galaxy feared them. Not because they were destroyers, but because they were impossible to understand. As night settled and strange lights flickered in the sky, Lyra followed Raiden to a ridge where they could see the burning remains of both their ships. She whispered, "We are alone." Raiden stood beside her quietly. He seemed to understand without words. Lyra looked at him again, this time with less fear and more confusion. How could such a dangerous creature also be her only hope for survival? And why did she feel safer near him than she ever felt alone? She studied his silhouette against the firelit sky and finally realized the truth that made her heart pound. If she stayed with him, her life would change forever. And if she left him, she might not survive the night. "Humans," she whispered, "are nothing like the stories." The deeper they moved into the forest, the quieter everything became, as if the entire world was holding its breath. Lyra stayed close behind Raiden, stepping where he stepped, matching his pace as best as she could. The night had fully settled, and strange glowing spores drifted like cold fireflies between the trees. Raiden scanned every shadow, every sound, every whisper of wind. Even while injured, he acted like he carried the weight of protecting both of them. Lyra watched the way his shoulders tensed each time the forest cracked or rustled. She had studied survival training in her academy, but Raiden's awareness was something else. Humans did not react. They anticipated. Their bodies seemed built for danger before it even arrived. And for the first time, she wondered if the galaxy feared them, not because of strength, but because they simply refused to die. A sudden tremor ran through the ground. Lyra grabbed Raiden's arm automatically, feeling his muscles tighten under her hand. He slowly motioned her to stay silent. The trees around them shook again, heavier this time. Something was moving toward them, something large. Lyra's breath hitched as the sound grew closer. She knew the forest housed many predators, but this one felt different, more confident, more hungry. Raiden gently guided her backward until they reached the mouth of a narrow cave hidden behind thick vines. He pushed the vines aside and signaled her to enter. Lyra hesitated. The space looked impossibly small, barely enough for one person, let alone two. Her people hated tight spaces. Their bones were light and flexible, but not meant for pressure. But Raiden's eyes left no room for doubt. He wanted her safe. So she squeezed inside, trembling, and he followed right after, pulling the vines across the entrance. The cave was pitch dark, warm, and so narrow that their shoulders pressed together instantly. Lyra gasped at the contact.
She had never been pressed against another body before, especially not a human one. Raiden seemed larger in the small space, his breath steady and warm against her ear. She could feel the slow rise and fall of his chest, the heat of his skin, and the strength in every part of him. Her heart raced, unsure if it was fear or something else. Do you not feel pain?" she whispered, her voice shaking. Raiden did not speak, but she felt him shift slightly, not away from her, just enough to make her feel protected. She could not understand how he could be so calm when her entire body threatened to collapse under the closeness. The ground trembled again. The creature outside sniffed the air, growling low. Its footsteps thudded around the cave entrance. Lyra pressed closer to Raiden without thinking. His arm wrapped around her, steadying her breathing. She felt his heartbeat, slow, strong, unshaken. The beast scratched the rocks, trying to find them, growling so deeply the cave vibrated. Lyra shut her eyes tight, her body trembling so hard she thought she might faint. Raiden's hand lightly covered her mouth to keep her silent. His touch was firm but gentle, and the gesture shocked her even more. Humans were supposed to be rough, forceful, uncaring. But this human knew exactly how fragile she was without needing a single explanation. After a long, terrifying moment, the creature moved away, its heavy steps fading into the distance. Raiden slowly removed his hand from her mouth. Lyra stayed still, frozen in place, trying to calm her heartbeat. You protected me," she whispered. Raiden simply nodded, exhausted but alert. Lyra felt her body relax for the first time since the crash, though her mind spun with questions. How could a human show such strength and such gentleness at the same time? How could he fight off a beast but still hold me like she mattered? A faint glow illuminated the cave as Lyra activated the small biolight on her wrist. She didn't mean to, but curiosity guided her eyes toward Raiden. Now that she could see him up close, really close, everything felt different. His face was bruised, dirt smeared across his cheek, a cut above his eyebrow dripping slowly. Yet he looked unbroken. His eyes, dark and focused, still held that fire she could not understand. His body, despite injuries, radiated warmth and strength. She reached out without thinking and touched his arm. His muscles tensed under my fingers, not in threat, but in surprise. Her species was delicate. A single sharp grip could leave a bruise, but Raiden's skin felt solid, his bones firm beneath the surface. "You should be resting," she whispered. He shook his head. Humans rarely rest when danger lingers. I felt the cave press harder on me. The small space forced our knees to touch, our shoulders aligned, our breaths mixing. I felt heat rise across my skin, confused by the reaction. My people reacted with closeness with panic. Humans seemed to react with endurance. Raiden did not show discomfort. Instead, he monitored me, making sure I wasn't frightened. He had just fought a deadly creature. He was bleeding, he was exhausted, yet he still paid attention to my safety first. A sudden noise echoed outside the cave, a distant howl. I shivered. Raiden's hand moved slightly, offering reassurance. I whispered the question that had been haunting my thoughts. How do humans survive things that would break others? Raiden did not understand the words, but he understood my expression. He lifted his arm slightly, showing the wound on his shoulder. His gesture seemed to say, "I survived because I must." And somehow, that was more frightening and more fascinating than any answer I expected. The night grew quieter, the cave warmer, and I realized something that made my breath catch. This human was becoming my only source of safety, my only shield, my only constant in a world that suddenly felt too big and too dangerous. I rested my head lightly against his shoulder, just for a moment. Raiden did not move, did not push me away. He simply remained solid and steady, as if he understood that even a brief moment of calm mattered. Outside, the forest continued to breathe with danger. Inside, I finally understood why my people feared humans. Not because they were monsters, but because they survived everything. Even the things that should break them. Even the closeness that should break her. The night slowly faded, But the world outside the cave did not grow safer. When the first pale light entered through the vines, Lyra opened her eyes and found herself still leaning against Raiden's shoulder. I froze, embarrassed, but he did not seem bothered. Humans slept deeply, yet woke instantly, and Raiden proved that when he opened his eyes the moment I shifted. He blinked once, twice, then tried to stand. I gasped. His legs shook beneath him, and his wounded arm looked worse than before. I reached out instinctively and held him steady. Raiden glanced down at my hand, then at his face, and gave a small nod, almost like gratitude. I felt a strange warmth rise in my chest, something I had never experienced around any creature, especially not a human one. The vines rustled slightly, warning them that the forest was waking up. Raiden pulled them aside slowly, checking the area. The moment he stepped out, his legs buckled. I darted forward, catching him, even though he weighed twice what I did. I pulled him back inside and lay him gently against the rock wall. Seeing him collapse like that shook me deeply. I had watched him fight a terrifying beast, lift metal beams, protect me the entire night. I had begun to believe humans were unbreakable. But now I saw the truth. Raiden wasn't invincible. He was hurting, exhausted, bleeding, and yet he still refused to rest. I knelt beside him, my fingers trembling as I examined the wound on his shoulder. "You saved me," I whispered. "Now let me help."
Raiden watched her quietly as she studied him. His eyes said something she could not translate. Trust, confusion, respect, maybe all at once. She traced the edge of the wound with careful fingers, examining the tough skin and strong bone beneath. Her species would break from the force he endured last night. But humans? They endured to the point of breaking, and then endured more. She spoke softly, more to herself than him. "Your body, it bends but does not shatter. It takes pressure without collapsing. I do not understand how your kind survives." Raiden did not respond in words, but his hand lifted weakly and touched her wrist as if telling her to continue. The simple gesture made her breath catch. He trusted her. A human trusted her. Outside, the wind rustled through the glowing trees, carrying distant growls. The forest was still dangerous, and Raiden needed strength fast. Lyra pressed both hands on his shoulder again, sending more warmth into the wound. Raiden clenched his jaw, taking the discomfort silently. She admired that. She admired everything about him, and that frightened her. When she was done, Raiden tried to sit again. His movements were slow, heavy, but controlled. He glanced toward the forest like he wanted to keep traveling. Lyra stepped in front of him and shook her head firmly. "No, you cannot walk like this." Raiden raised an eyebrow, confused but patient. Lyra pointed to the wound, then to the cave floor. "Rest," she said clearly. Raiden stared at her, then finally nodded. Lyra exhaled with relief. For the first time, she saw a human listen, not because of command, but because he respected her concern. She sat beside him, watching the morning light spread across the forest. For the first time since the crash, she felt the fear inside her settle. But her peace did not last long. A loud roar echoed in the distance. Lyra tensed immediately. Raiden pushed himself up despite her warning. She grabbed his arm, shaking her head again, but he gently placed his hand on hers and stood anyway. That was when she understood something terrifying. Humans did not stop. They did not rest when danger approached. They rose, no matter how broken they were. Raiden limped to the cave entrance, scanning the area. Lyra followed him, unwilling to let him face danger alone. They saw smoke rising far beyond the trees, not from the crash, from something else, something moving closer. Raiden's expression hardened. He lifted a small device from his belt and pressed a button. Static, no signal. Lyra stepped closer, speaking with urgency. "Your people? They might come?" Raiden looked at her with a tired frown, then nodded slowly, but his expression said something else. "They might be too far, too late." Lyra swallowed.
She had never felt this kind of fear before, the fear of losing someone she had known for such a short time, yet trusted more than anyone. When Raiden tried to take a step, she reached out and grabbed his hand. He paused. She stared at him with determined eyes. "I will not leave you," even if he did not understand. Raiden held her gaze, then gently squeezed her hand back. In that moment, Lyra realized a truth she never expected to face. She did not only want Raiden to survive, she needed him to survive. Humans might not break easily, but she was starting to realize something else. She would break if she lost this one. Raiden stepped out of the cave with slow, controlled breaths, but Lyra could tell every movement cost him more strength than he wanted her to see. The forest around them had changed since dawn. The glowing spores that drifted peacefully at night were now gone, replaced by rising heat and wandering shadows that moved too quietly to be normal. Something was following them. Lyra could feel it like a cold hand on the back of her neck. Raiden felt it too. His body shifted into that sharp, alert posture she recognized. His instincts always reacted before his mind. Humans were frightening like this, not because of power, but because of awareness so deep it felt animal and wise at the same time. They continued walking along a narrow ridge that overlooked the remains of both their crashes. Smoke curled upward like dark fingers, and something metallic glinted among the charred ground. Lyra pointed at the wreck, but Raiden did not slow. He only tightened his grip on his broken weapon and kept scanning the tree line. She stepped closer to him, her heartbeat quickening. His steps were uneven. His breathing had grown heavier, but still he moved forward, refusing to stop. It made her chest ache with confusion and worry. Why do humans push themselves like this? Why do they act as if their body was only a suggestion, not a limit? A branch cracked behind them. Lyra grabbed Raiden's hand before she even realized she had moved. He turned sharply, positioning himself between her and the sound, even though he could barely stand. The shadows thickened, leaves trembled. Every instinct in Lyra screamed to run, but Raiden held his ground. When the creature emerged from the bushes, Lyra froze. It was larger than the beast from the night before, twice the height of Raiden, with jagged bone spikes across his shoulders and glowing blue saliva dripping from its jaws. Its roar echoed through the forest, shaking the ridge beneath their feet. Raiden pushed Lyra aside just as the beast slammed into him, knocking him hard across the dirt. Lyra screamed, running toward him, but a burst of dust forced her back. Raiden struggled to rise, coughing, bleeding, yet still preparing to face the monster again. Lyra stared in horror. He could barely lift his weapon, but his eyes were full of fire. Humans did not surrender, not even when death stood inches from them. The creature struck again, but this time Raiden dodged, rolling across the ground with surprising speed. He swung the metal weapon, striking the creature's knee. The beast roared in pain, stumbling. Raiden used the moment to grab Lyra's hand, pulling her toward a cluster of rocks. But before they could escape, the creature leapt forward and blocked their path. Its jaws opened wide, the blue saliva sizzling where it dripped. Raiden stood in front of her again. His legs shook. His breathing turned ragged, but he did not move aside. Lyra grabbed his shirt from behind, her voice trembling. "Raiden, please, do not die." He glanced back at her for the briefest second, his eyes softening. Then he turned back to the creature, ready to make his last stand. But something changed. A loud explosion echoed through the forest. The beast roared and collapsed as a beam of bright blue energy struck its back. Lyra turned and saw a small rescue ship descending between the trees, her engines glowing brightly. Raiden collapsed to his knees, relief flooding his face for the first time. Lyra ran to him, kneeling beside him, her hand shaking as she touched his arm. "Your people," she whispered, her voice cracking. Raiden nodded, weakly, though his eyes never left her face. The ship landed with a heavy thud. 2 armored human soldiers rushed out, weapons raised. They sprinted toward Raiden, shouting his name. One of them reached him immediately, lifting him by the shoulders. The other soldier pointed at Lyra, confused.
"Sir, who is she?" Raiden tried to speak, but his voice failed. Lyra stood slowly, fear twisting inside her. Would they take him away and leave her in this wild place? The soldier repeated the question louder. "Who is she? Is she hostile?" Raiden shoved himself upright, gripping the soldier's armor. He pointed at Lyra, shaking his head firmly. Then he said one word, weak, hoarse, but clear. "No." Lyra's breath stopped. The soldiers exchanged glances, surprised. Humans rarely vouched for another species without proof, but Raiden stepped toward her again, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. The gesture said everything she needed to know. He wanted her safe. He trusted her. She swallowed hard, her eyes burning. The soldiers guided Raiden toward the ship, helping him walk. Lyra followed slowly, unsure if she was allowed. But Raiden kept looking back, making sure she stayed close. When they reached the ramp, one soldier paused, blocking her path. Raiden growled something in his language, weak but full of command. The soldier hesitated, then stepped aside, and Lyra walked into a human ship for the first time. Inside, Raiden collapsed onto a medical bed. As the medics rushed in, they pushed Lyra aside gently, not understanding her connection to him. She stood quietly near the wall, watching as Raiden's eyes fluttered open one more time. He lifted his hand and reached toward her. She stepped closer. Why did you protect me?" she whispered. Raiden did not know her language, but he understood her meaning. He pointed gently to her chest, then to his own. A simple gesture, a simple truth. Connection. Lyra's heart trembled. Her species thought humans were dangerous because they were strong, but she finally understood the real reason. Humans bonded hard, protected fiercely, chose with their entire soul. And once they chose you, they never let go. Raiden's eyes closed as the medics worked on him, but his hand stayed reaching in her direction. She gently held it, whispering, "I will not leave you. Not now, not ever." For the first time, she understood the truth behind the stories. Humans did not break.